help me set up chairs and move tables. So again, let me thank each one of you. I truly appreciate it. It is our pleasure to introduce Darrin Lowery, and I can tell by the size of the room that he's of interest to all of you. So this is exciting for us. And what I typically do is let the speakers introduce themselves because they do such a better job than I could ever do. So thank you all for coming today. If you're not members, we have membership forms in the back, and we'd love to have you join us. And here's Darrin.
Well, thank you very much. I debated with a couple of folks about giving this presentation doing interpretive dance, but instead I opted to show pictures. So anyhow, I'm about as inbred as you can get. I'm from Talbot County area. There's a lot of people in cemeteries that I'm related to. Happened to get interested in coastal erosion because I grew up on an island, and I took that to a career. So basically now I look at coastal areas and help people determine, what cultural resources are going to be impacted and how they can build back better. I spent 8.5 months in Alaska and the Bering Sea and looking at coastlines and islands. And now I'm shifted down to the Gulf area. So you caught me at an opportune time because otherwise I will be out of here come December. So, but anyhow, is there any way to dim the lights just a little bit? I think the imagery would look a little bit better. Just
is that a light or dark, really?
Yeah, I'm of the slide era when slides didn't show this, or images didn't show this well. But anyhow, so today's topic is understanding island loss in Chesapeake Bay. And I did a calculation on the way up the road, 32 years doing coastal surveys for various state agencies, federal agencies, and private groups. And this is one of the islands we're going to go back to. This image was taken in 2018, and what you're seeing there is completely gone. So let's get into this topic. Okay, this is the island that we were looking at, James Island. And James Island in 1847 was about 1,000 acres in land with 10 farms. They had orchards, there was a school. And you can see the georeferenced overlays as the island shrinks. And this is 2011, 2015, 2017, and 2018. There's a couple points here. The last remnants of every island that I've ever seen disappear is always the topographically low tidal mark. Now, go home, try this out tonight if you come take a bath, fill up the bathtub. What fills with water first? It's the low areas. Well, the low areas always survive to the end. So, we'll get into that in a minute. The public media gives you this sky is falling, rising seas. They use a term that I really don't like, sinking, as if you've had a boat that you've drilled a hole in it and it sinks to the bottom of the bay. That's not a geologic process that occurs unless you have some isostatic issues where the crust is actually going down. And newspapers a century ago were using the same term, sinking. It's not a good term. But we'll address that in a minute. And we'll get back to these articles because one of the islands we're going to talk about is mentioned here. Now, these are the islands and or landscapes that I'm going to discuss. They're scattered all throughout the area, and they have good stories to tell, geologic and archaeological. And I show this one as an example. This is a 19th century, early 19th century well, could be late 18th century or very late. In 2013, October 16th, 11 years later, I'm standing exactly where that well was. The shoreline is retreated 125 feet, and that bank back there was less short, so it looks lower. It's actually the same height, about 4 meters high. So this is, the well's not there anymore, it's gone. We'll get into the term of sinking. And I'm going to use an island that recently disappeared to illustrate that sinking is not a good term with respect to Bodkin Island. And we're going to go, that was 1850 or thereabouts, here's 1900, you can see it shrunk. We're going to zoom in on that box right there and show you what Bodkin Island looked like in 1957. Here it is in 1957, it is broken into two pieces. This has got a little bit of upland, there's marsh. This is the lower end here. So in 1957, the island had been fragmented by erosion. And then we're going to jump to 2008. In 2008, the northern section is completely gone. In the intervening time, somebody put a bulkhead or a berm around the island to preserve it. But you can see that there's a plateau, an elevated landform in amongst that. The water is actually cut through the cracks in the bulkhead. So if you're on a boat, 2008, this is what you can see. You see the bulkhead, you see some cormorants and mergansers, some dead trees. You can smell the island before you saw it because of the guano from the birds. But you can see that there's an elevated plateau in the middle. And by 2022, that elevated plateau had shrunk to a smaller section. And by 2023, there were two segments here. And then late in 2023, it was gone. Now, did Bodkin Island sink? Well, I'll pose a question. If the island sunk, why did the bulkhead still above water? And the reason why the island disappeared is not because of sinking, it's because of, I use this to describe myself, bad genetics in a worse environment. It's bad geology in a worse environment here. So if you look at 2020, Parsons Island was made up of windblown loess, two packages, an older package that's about 40,000 years, and a younger package that's about 12,000 or so years old. And that loess is made up of silt. Actually, a lot of people around here call it clay, but it doesn't really have enough clay to call it clay. But as it breaks off, calves off, you can see there's like chunks. They're called heads or polygons. It's a head phase. They break off in blocks, increasing the surface area. So the water, as it moves through the gaps here, begins to emulsify the island. Kind of take if anybody's ever taken a ceramics class, use a slurry. It's the same thing. It's just sort of a clay that's mixed with too much water. And then eventually it dissolves and falls, and the island goes through the cracks. So Bodkin Island didn't sink, it quite literally floated away. And I'll show you that. Here's James's Island. We're going to go back again around the same time, October of 2013, about the same time that will. And you look at James's Island, there's a lot of trees, but you'll notice a nice distinct mud streak that's going off to the northeast. It is flood tide in the little chop tank at that time. Now we're going to jump ahead and see if that process occurs in more modern times. And you'll also notice there's not a lot of waves. You can see in this image. And here we are. We do have some waves, but this is 2022. So this is the same view. And you can see the cloud of smoke is being carried away. James's Island literally floated away in suspension because it emulsified by the water and the tide carried it away. So you don't really have to have wave energy when you have an island that's made out of loess. You can see it here.
Darrin, how do you spell loess?
L-O-E-S-S. Germans are called Lurs, just because of, I don't know. Because of Germans, I guess. But anyhow, you can see the water's clear here. You can tell the flow of the tide. You can see the smoke cloud there. That the actual land is being held in suspension by the water. Now we're going to give you a brief summary of islands here. A lot of people think that erosion is unique to the 20th and 21st century. It's been happening for a very long period of time. This is Watts Island. This is down in Virginia. This is hit in 1850 or thereabouts, and this is 2013. You can see me standing on the southern end. The times are noted here, and you can see the change. Well, let's go through this process. Here's Watts. Watts is kind of wedged between the Pocomoke Sound here and the Tangier Sound. It essentially is an upland. It formed the same way that Bodkin did, Parsons Island did, James Island did. This is a wind-blown ridge of sand and silt. It was occupied for a very long period of time, as indicated by the archaeological record around it. In the War of 1812, the Brits, who were stationed over here on Tangier, would go to Watts to get their fresh water. Evidently, here at Fort Albion was not a good place to get fresh water. But you can see, it's been colonized for a long period of time. At 13,000 years ago, when this projection point was lost, essentially the Tangier Sound Valley was here, and the Pocomoke Sound Valley was there, and Watts was probably about 150 feet above the water. So we're going to jump to an island series that you've probably heard one about Hollands, and I care less about Hollands, but it's one island right here that you've probably never heard of, called Long Island. And Long Island in 1850 had a house on an orchard. It was about 32 acres. And we'll address these features. Actually, Hollands is this ridge here. This was Courtney's Island. The last house to disappear was here. But we're going to focus on this one as well, but I'll show you some of these features. Long Island, like I said, in 1850 or 1849 was about 32 acres. However, the first land pat for it was in 1680, and it was over 400 acres. So even by 1849, it has lost a substantial amount of its land. So erosion was occurring in the 18th century as well. If you look at Long Island around 1901, it's just a little thin strip. This is an archival photograph that shows you what Hollands looked like. You can see the chain of houses. The last house was up here, the cemetery's there. I'll show you all that in a minute. This is the cemetery. The cemetery's still there. So the folks that are buried, or at least some of them are still there. Some of them have washed out. And then over here's the last house. Everybody heard about that in the news media. And there's the last house. And he just fell into the bay. And the reason why this house didn't sink is because the same landscape that made up Bodkin, Parsons, James's is reflected here. It's wind-blown sediment. And the island did get pounded by waves, but it also floated away. Now we go to some islands that disappeared that you don't even see them on maps. This is, again, the Augustin Hermes map of 1670. I use it because it's a good map. It gives you an idea of what was there. Right here to the north and east of Tillman, in the 1846 Coastal Survey, there are two little teeny tiny chunks. However, if you go back to 1830, there was a 1 acre island. There was a land patent before that. So in a period of about 16 years, it disappeared. And it disappeared before cartographers could really map what was there. So we really don't have an idea what was there, but somebody wanted it because they had it. We'll go to Herring Island. Herring Island, people probably heard of Herring Island Flats. It's in the Miles River. Interesting landscape. In 1846, it was about 6 or 7 acres. It's right at the mouth of the Wye River. But more importantly, it's right in the middle of the Miles River. Not a good place to be. But Herring Island, in 1869, had a little bit of upland. We have this flag here. This is courtesy of Cindy Schmidt. Her name's right there. It's about 4 acres. But more importantly, in 1685, Herring Island was 75 acres. So it lost 71 acres between 1685 and 1869. Erosion is not unique to today. It's been happening in the past. So by 1937, Herring Island has gone bye-bye. We'll go to an island that disappeared before the 1840s coastal surveys began. There's a creek over near Oxford called Island Creek. Is there an island on Island Creek? Kind of a sort of rhetorical question, but there was. In 1826, there was Goldsboro Island, 11 3/4 acres right near the mountain. So between 1826 and 1847, it eroded away. Another island in Talbot County, Royston's, also called Alderton's Island, right at the mouth of Broad Creek. You can see it in 1846 here. It has an upland and an orchard. By 1937, it's just 2 pieces of tidal marsh, and by 1957, it's gone. The original land patent in 1694 was for 41 acres, and that's about where the meets and the bounds go. So, you know, many landscapes existed that people utilized that have long since gone bye-bye. They're now parts, they fill the valleys of the creeks and the bays that we have here on the eastern shore. And I'm going to get to this because actually the Talbot Waterman's Museum throwing an exhibit on this year. And it's an island that I think one of the islands that got me interested in archaeology. It's Sharp's Island, right here. This is the 1670 map. This is the first map in the Chesapeake that shows the name Sharps. Prior to that, it was had different names. But we'll go through that in a minute, or we're actually going to go through it in detail. The first plotting of Sharps was 1608. When John Smith sailed up the bay, he sailed up the western shore of the bay. He couldn't see the mouth of the Choptank River. He denoted the Little Choptank, you can see that there. This is probably James's Island, which was a peninsula at that time. But at that time, it was greater than 1,400 acres of land. That's a massive chunk of land. And where there was 1,400 acres in 1608, there's nothing there today. Now it's just the bay, and where people grew crops now, we catch oysters. You'll see some maps that show that. By 1860 or 1873, the island had been reduced to about 900 acres. Between 1631, it was originally called Cleburne's Island. William Cleburne and his groups may have floundered there in 1631. Estimates were about 1,400 acres. By 1673, it lost about 500 acres. That's 7.7 acres a year. That's not out of the realm of possibility for that area. By 1798, this is the 1795 map, you can see there's 2 fragments. It was down to about 700 acres. At least your pointer's not working, there it is. And the intervening time, the rate slowed about 1.6 acres per year. And that could be because there was tidal marsh. Could be a variety of things. We don't know. We don't have maps. But the first detailed map we have were the coastal surveys. These are amazing charts. I have access to every one of them. Awesome. In 1848, if you georeference this map, it's about 438 acres. Between 1798 and 1848, it's losing about 5.2 acres per year. And you can really look at this map and see what that landscape was. There was forest on the bayside, there were plowed fields, there was a lighthouse up here that was destroyed by erosion, and then they built a second lighthouse offshore, and this is actually not the current lighthouse. We'll get to that in a minute. But you can see the details. You can see where it says lighthouse, there's a field, and the trees. And then you zoom in on the east side, you can see there was a house, there's some outbuildings, there's a road taken to the bayside, probably to get wood, firewood in the wintertime would have been your fuel. There's a hint that there was another island there called Little Island Point, even though it's not there in 1848. You can see a tidal drain, probably a spring head here. And you move to the southern end of the island. You can see it's mainly tidal marsh. There's a little upland hummock. It's mainly sand beach. There's a duck line. It's called appropriately Beach Point. You can get an idea how big this island was relative to Tillman. This map was published in 1795. So even when this map was published, it was outdated because it shows the third lighthouse, the one that's still there today. But you can get an idea how big it is and look how compared to Tillman and or Cook's Point, massive chunk of land. Take that and double it, and that's what it was in 1798. There's another glimpse. The only image that we have of what Sharp's Island looked like when you were coming up the bay, and it's published on a map. And you can see this, I tilted the map this way because you're looking at it from a bird's eye view. And this is, if you're sitting in chairs or sitting in a boat, you can see this matches up in the lower end. You can see the marsh, you can see a little hummock there. You can see the trees starting to accumulate. There's the field. It rises up, and then there's the lighthouse right there, the north end of Charlestown Lighthouse. So that's the only image of what we have in the 19th century of what it would look like. And you can see the lighthouse. You get an image. Now, Cindy Smith, I don't know if she's here today. She may not. If she is, stand up and do triple sow cows for, oh, I see you in the back. Now Bonnie gave me permission to use this, but Cindy did a great job because nobody has any idea of what this lighthouse looked like. And she did a reconstruction based on written accounts. And the island had wheels, you can move it. And the reason why you wanted to move it is because even in 1850, they recognized that erosion was an issue. They constantly had to move it. So if you could go back in a time machine and be standing just about here looking out into the bay, this is what you might have seen. So it's a good thing it had wheels on it. Pull it around. You halfway expect a cartoon little image going out. But the point being is, with written accounts, you were able to reconstruct this. Part of the historical record of these islands has vanished, and Charles, fortunately, has some record. But we also have some other written accounts. In 1873, the island was about 300 acres. Between 1848 and 1873, it's losing about 5.5 acres per year. Margaret Stephen Parsons, who lived out there, she stated that we stood on the porch and watched the waves wash over the pine trees, and the tide got so high it ran through the ditch and cut the island in two during the centennial storm. Here's the ditch, and we're going to fade into 1900. And you can see the scar. It quite literally scoured that landscape, filled in with sediment, it became tidal water. In 1900, Sharps Island encompassed only 90 acres. Between 1873-ish and 1900, it's losing about 7.7 acres per year. We also have, by the turn of the century, we have some images that have been republished many times, but you can reconstruct them. This is the steamboat wharf constructed by Miller Crichton and Sons. They had conceived of an idea of having a resort. Here's a hotel. You can also see a triangulation marker here. That was how they surveyed the island. They needed benchmarks. There's one on the north end and one on the south end. There's also some other things here. Some are trees. Probably that's a house right there. Here's the hotel. Here, most people have seen this one. This is a rare side view. Get an idea of the immensity. It said it could comfortably house 75 people. And in 1905, a group of Talbot County businessmen went out there and went fishing. And fortunately, here at Blackberry, they have the original diary of that. And these photographs exist. So we have glimpses of how people utilize this. And more importantly, you can see right behind them, you can see the steamboat wharf here. Okay, and when we do the overlay of the maps, we have the first lighthouse, which was on the island. That's the one you can roll. We don't have any images of the second lighthouse. That was one cut off by ice in 1880 or thereabouts. And then we have images of the third lighthouse. That's the one that's still there today. You'd be amazed the number of people that said the lighthouse marks the current location of the bowl. And it may have in the 17th century, but it didn't when all these maps were created. The last remnant of the island was down here, and that's at 1.8 miles further south from the current lighthouse. So we're going to go from 1900 to 1937. You can see by 1937 it's about 13 acres. The rate's slowing, it's about 2 acres per year. It's a little bit of marsh, or actually more marsh and a little bit upland. And we do have an aerial photograph. This is east looking west. This is the south end, that's north end. You can't see any details. But in 1939 or thereabouts, the U.S. Navy decided to bomb the island. That probably didn't help it. I don't know. But they also used it as a machine gun target range. There is a photograph, and I got to give Bonnie Messick credit for this. This is your grandfather, isn't it? This is her grandfather. This is the people from Tillman that went out there on the island. This is Bill Cummings. That's Herman Keith Harrison. That was Patsy Hathaway. This is Florence and Audrey. And this one here is my father. Aww. So we can see, we can get an idea about how people utilize that island. They went out there and they explored it. And this, I have to credit this gentleman, and of course his wife, because when I was a kid, 1976, 77, I think it was, that really cold winter, I got to see some of the stuff that he had found out there. And it was a massive collection of artifacts that he had found. I mean, truly massive. I wish I could go back in that time machine and go through it, but unfortunately I can't do that. So anyhow, so we're going to go from 1937 to 1948. You can see it's reduced down to just a little teeny tiny itty bitty chunk of tidal marsh. The rate is slowed greatly down to 0.8 acres per year. We have an aerial photograph. This is the aerial photograph from the south. You can see the steamboat wharf here, the remnants. These are two bombing targets on the island. The Navy had them structured up and they would drop one of these bombs. There you can also see a bomb crater there. And also in 1948, they did a survey of the island to map it out. By 1952, this is a very blurry image. I've never used this image because it's a bad image, but it's at the National Archives. On July 2nd, 1952, you can see this is the island. This is because they had dirt all over the camera. And then there's a 1953 picture. You can see the workboat. That is Bonnie Messick's grandfather out there looking for arrowheads at it. And then there's one of the Navy. This actually is not a Navy target. This is a dredge line bunker. So we have a few glimpses of that. By 1954, Sharks Island was gone. It lost its 346-year battle with the Chesapeake Bay, 1,400 acres into the bay. And by 1958, it appears as an obstruction. They still show the pilings of the island. So it went from 1,400 to 0. If you look at these newspaper articles, the ones that I showed you, now there was a scientist at Johns Hopkins around the turn of the century. He was noted as a person's competent to talk on the subject. This person who was competent to talk on the subject made a prediction. He said that within 100 years, 1907 to 2007, Ken Island will have sunk into the bay. Let's take a ride if it's still there. Hooper's Island will be gone. Sharks Island, Barron, Taylor's, and Holland's. Of the 6 islands mentioned in here, only 1 disappeared, and that was the one we're talking about. You can see how it retreated. It's asymmetrical erosion. The erosion is heaviest on the north and west side. The last remnant to survive is tidal marsh. So why did Sharks Island and other islands erode away at such an alarming rate? It's a combination of factors. There's no easy answer. It's like, the way I described one time is like trying to fit a size 9 shoe on everybody's foot in this room. Some people will be happy, but there'll be a lot of people, myself included, that would like that because I can't fit wear a size 9 shoe. So it's a combination of factors, so we're going to go over those. Just a few. One is the geology. We have a written account of the geology from 1914. The northern part of the island was made out of material of the Talbot Formation. That's siltone. And it rises out of the water as much as 7 feet. Here, the erosion has been enormous. And then, we have another one. The marshland on the southwest part of the island is withstanding the force of the waves much more effectively than the rest of the island, and will doubtless be the last to disappear. 100% accurate. Hit the ball out of the court. This photograph here, again, an error. The National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration shows this image and claims this photograph was taken in 1950, showing a bunch of folks going out there dressed in 19th century garb. This photograph was taken in August of 1905. They were all by about 45 years. The other thing is particle size. Sand geology, or sand landscapes with sand-based geology, they erode really quick because there's usually no cohesive bond between individual sand particles unless it's really old sand. However, water can't hold sand. Go home, take sand, dump it in your glass, and it'll go right to the bottom. So what happens is it erodes quick, but it forms these things. These are shallow sandbars offshore. So as a result, they actually impede further erosion. This is a picture of Savage Neck. It has a distance of water, from land to water on the northwest of about 113 miles. So it's a lot of wind bearing down on the shoreline. And believe it or not, 170 years, it hasn't lost much. It's lost more in the last 10 years because they did something stupid down that's a whole other story. If it's silty clay loam, like James's, it floats away, like a cloud of smoke. Another variable, fetch, that's the distance that wind travels across water. And you've got to calculate that for each shoreline. Each shoreline's unique. Bathymetry. Bathymetry and geology are actually kind of related, but you can see around Sharp's Island, it's fairly deep around Sharp's, or it was. And when it's deep water or adjacent to a landscape, that doesn't result in a good outcome. You can see that with Taylor's Island here. It's fairly deep adjacent to the shoreline, so when the waves, it's not really rough that day, but you can see as the waves strike that shoreline, it delivers the entire amount of energy to that shoreline. It would be kind of like, imagine you having a sledgehammer and hitting a wall on the same spot. You'll tear a hole in it. And that'll introduce us to another variable very soon. So when it's shallow, like Savage Neck, here it is blowing 45 miles an hour to the northwest. I wouldn't want to be out there in a boat. Here I could tolerate a boat. That wave energy is dissipated. So you're destroying that process that would rip the shoreline up. This I threw in just because you see more of it now than I did when I was a kid, subaquatic vegetation. Just like the kelp beds in the Pacific Northwest, it actually calms the water. Look how calm it is here, and that correlates exactly with the subaquatic vegetation. Tidal amplitude. And the tidal amplitude is different lower end of the bay in the Atlantic seacoast than it is in the upper bay. When you have a great high tidal amplitude, or great tidal amplitude, like suppose this is high tide and that's low tide on the floor, the shorelines erode differently. This is down the Machapongo River. You can see a bank back there, the trees that fell down. So when the tide's high, this is really low tide. When the tide's high, the water's lapping up against that bank, but because the tide goes out so far every day, that sledgehammer that's hitting the shoreline is not hitting it at the same spot all the time. So the sediment that erodes actually gets deposited offshore because the area is dry a good portion of the day. Vegetation can colonize it. It's not subaquatic now, but it will be at high tide. If it's low tidal amplitude, like James's Island, this picture I took years ago, the sledgehammer's hitting the same spot time and time again. And as a result, it tears the snot out of the island. And more importantly, you can see how the geology is affecting it. It's very deep adjacent to that shoreline. Very deep. You step off the edge of that bank, it would be over my head. Seasonal presence of ice. Actually, this is the wrong date, 76, 77. But you can see the effect of ice on structures. This is the original third lighthouse prior to the winter of 1976-77. After the winter of 1976-77, she was listening to the side. And that's what ice can do. Water in its solid state can be a formidable foe. And if you look at the history of Sharp's Island and its erosion rate, during the Little Ice Age, that's what Talbot is called, written accounts of what's happening in the bay are pretty spotty. However, each one of these lines represents a reported event of ice. It doesn't say it's the same, and you can see earlier on there's a lot more ice regularly forming. People used to ice skate from Baltimore to Annapolis on a regular basis. So, when that happens and it's in the bay, and when it breaks up, you might as well have a battering ram. So, Sharp's Island had all the bad variables. It was just bad all around. So without evoking sea level rise, J. Fred Hunter in 1914 made a prediction when Sharp's Island would disappear. He stated, it may be interesting in this connection to venture a prediction based on the facts at hand as to the time of the final disappearance of Sharp's Island. At the rate during the last 10 years on the West Coast, the estimated date of disappearance is probably about 1950 to 1955. It disappeared in 54, and he didn't know the Navy was going to bomb it. So, with all these landscapes, people utilize those landscapes. And a lot of people go, who cares, But that's what got me interested, is the people that live, because the best way to analyze or assess this is, if you could go back to 48 BC, you're in Alexandria in Egypt, the library is burning, and nobody's interested in recording the papyrus written by Socrates or Plato. So we're getting to that. So in Sharpstown, there were literally boxes and boxes and boxes of this stuff. And this, I like this image because it's like everything. This is the International Weights and Measures of Artifacts of cigarette boxes, but this is bigger than that. But this encapsulates 13,000 years of prehistory. And you don't have to pay attention to this. This is oldest to youngest. But you can see from 13,000 years up until right here, you've got people living out there. The sea level was radically different 13,000 years ago than it is today. But more importantly, you can look at this 1848 map. I can look at it and go, whoa. If I could go back in a time machine to 1848, this is where I think there would be sites. Every one of those red dots would be a good place. You'll see that blue line, that's the drainage divide, the inner flume. That's where the water on this side entered in the chop tank, the water on that side entered into the Susquehanna or Chesapeake Bay. So, given those variables, and given that map, I would have predicted that there would be a lot of early sites there, and lo and behold, there are some. Why did so many artifacts why were so many of them found out there in the turn of the 20th century? Well, artifacts are nothing more than like beach glass once they're out of contact. So suppose time one you have an island like this, cross section. There are several sites, it's eroding. What happens to the artifacts is that they stay with the shoreline, they migrate with that shoreline. And then they continue to migrate, and at the turn of the century, when the island was nothing more than tidal marsh is not high. All those artifacts pop up on top of that marsh. So needless to say, it was a free-for-all. I never believed the stories my father told me that the place was packed until October 13th of 2001. We're doing a survey for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Landed on an island on the east side, and in 2.5 hours we found 758 projectile points. And that's just the projectile points. They're not including the other stuff like bonefish hooks and other things. So I've seen it in real life. And if you look at the artifacts in Sharps, you can see that also. Some of them have been a rock tumbler for like 3 centuries. Some are lesser so. Some are sharp as razor blades. Some have been exposed to tidal salt marsh geochemistry. But more importantly, all you have to do is go around the bay. This is a shell midden down there at Hoover's Island Stone. But you can see what's happening. It's actually underwater, as it is. It's being ripped to snot by wave energy. And the actual midden debris is migrating with the waves. It's actually migrating over the marsh. And it's called overwash. It's a very common thing. So what happened at Sharp's Island, minus the midden, there could have been midden out there too, but the artifacts just accumulated, kept accumulating. So what about sea level? Well, when these artifacts here were deposited out there, sea levels are about 150 feet lower. So if you were at Sharp's Island, you were on top of an elevated peninsula looking down a 150-foot valley to the Susquehanna to the west and to the Chesapeake River Valley to the east. 9,000 years ago, sea levels were about 80 feet lower. So the sea levels are starting to rise. You're starting to see the intrusion of oceanic waters. There's probably low salinity. We know that oysters were at the mouth of the Potomac in the central portion of the bay at that time. Were they here? If they were down on the low end. By 5,000 years ago, when sea levels were about 35 feet lower, it would have been a peninsula. There would have been a ton of oysters out there, and tons of crabs and tons of fish. 1,000 years ago, Sharps was probably still connected. False Channel had been filled in, but erosion was affecting this because it was big fetch. It wasn't probably long after that it separated from Tillman. 360 years ago, the sea level was about a foot lower than they are today when this pipe was smoked out there. When that map was created, somebody was out there having a nicotine fit. And then 125 years ago, when they constructed the steamboat wharf, these artifacts, again, smoking. So all the Europeans did was smoke. Basically what we've had from the archaeological record. And then we get to the last archaeological record of Sharp's Island when they bombed it and they shot it with 50 caliber, 20 millimeter cannon rounds. Ironically, the earliest and last archaeological presence of Sharps Island consists of nothing more than projectile points. In 1978, I was on one of the clam boats. They went out there for clams. They were still out there to find some artifacts. But they did find some. And so some of these had probably eroded from the island or still out there on the bottom somewhere. Some of them may be drowned from drowned features. I plotted all of those. This is kind of an anal kid that I was. Plotted all those. But more importantly, if you superimpose where the island was relative to the orchard bars, where that lighthouse was in 1848, later became an orchard bar called Stowe. So you can see this sort of transition from an upland where, according to some accounts, you could see flocks of grazing sheep and fields of wheat from the mainland. So they went to, shallow bar with lots of orchard grass wet and fridge. So the vanished islands mentioned in this presentation has a story to tell. And this is where I get into some diatribe here. Unfortunately, not many folks are documenting these stories before they disappeared. The only reason why I got interested into it is because I got inspired as a kid. There wasn't much to do on Tellin Island, sort of 1976, 77. You either drove up and down the island on a big pickup truck, I didn't do, or you go and you just read a lot of books and look at collections and stuff. But I'm gonna leave you with this also. Not all the islands in the bay are disappearing. Some are actually getting bigger. At the mouth of the bay, this is the Augustine Herman map. Back in 1670, there was just open water. There was nothing. By 1807, there's an area called the Isaac Shoal. The first land patent was for 33 acres of a sandbar called Isaac Shoal. It was issued to John Fitchett, John Dixon, Tilney Dixon in 1738. Prior to 1738, no land existed there. Let's watch that land through time. Here's that bar that the folks patented in 1738. It was a sandbar with tidal marsh. Here's the Isaacs. That was a sandbar there. We're going to migrate through time. That sandbar suddenly moves. More sediment accumulates. Greater tidal marsh. In 1888, by 1905, it's getting bigger. If somebody built a structure out there, but in 1905, 1907 is getting bigger, the structure's still there. In 1842, it's even bigger. There's an island here called Adams Island that represents accumulated sediment. And then eventually Adams Island becomes enveloped by sand. So where no land existed in 1700, Fisherman's Island is now 1,850 acres of land. So where Sharps Island lost 1,400 acres, Fisherman's Island gained 1,850 acres. The accretion rate during this period of time is 6.65 acres since 1738. Actually, from 1958 to 2011, the accretion rate's greater. It's probably because of this thing, the Bay Bridge Tunnel, is acting as a sediment fence. But more importantly, and I'll leave you with this little final statement on this, is that years ago I was invited to a lecture, and I asked the speaker who had done a documentary on high tide in Chester County. I said, do you believe that erosion is evidence of sea level rise? He said, well, I'm no scientist. But yeah. And I said, okay. So I gave him the data for Fisherman's Island. I said, so if erosion is evidence of sea level rise, does accretion indicate that sea levels are falling? He never answered that question. So these landscapes not only are disappearing, but they have a story to tell. And I'll show you some of the story. Years and years and years, I've walked shorelines, seen a lot of stuff, so I'm going to share that. Some of you might be shocked by a few of these things. I've got to the point where I don't care, but anyhow, here you go. This is what you've lost. This is a casket. This is Sarah Bloodsworth. She was buried there. She is now officially part of the Hunga River watershed. There is nothing left of Sarah. She is now cremated. She's probably cremated. But anyhow, this individual here, this is a gray shaft. The bones have been compressed. There weren't many bones left. This is the glass that was in front of the top of the casket. It's about 1850. This 1850s cemetery is gone. This is an early one. This is probably 1750. This is a skull cap. There's a nail. Look at the structure of the casket. It's a click. It could be earlier than 1750. This individual long since gone. We have no idea who they were. But this individual's even gone longer. This one's much older. This one's around 1,500 years old. There's a skull cap part of the mandible there. It's now locked away. The state agency tried to protect it. I told it wasn't going to work. It didn't work. Now their bridge concrete's about 42 feet offshore. So UNGA, sorry, whoever you want to call it, is now part of the UNGA watershed. This individual here, you can see the top of the skull, you can see the leg bones. That's what's called tightly flexed burial. There's the jaw. It's probably around 2,000 to 2,500 years old. This individual's gone. This is a burial. This is a feature. It's not a burial. This is a feature, a pit feature with refuse. I paid for the dates on this. It's around 1380, 1350. Not only can tell you something about what people are eating, but we did some work when I was working down the fishing bay. You can reconstruct the salinity using isotopes. You can tell how polluted the water was compared to today, or lack of pollution. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with other than, oh, hey, Native Americans ate oysters. Well, we kind of know that. But you can get an idea of what was the area like in the past compared to today. Because Native Americans didn't go all the way down lower in the bay, canoe a bunch of oysters to the other bay. Here's a mitten. This is down there, Hoover Sound. This is a projectile point in situ. This one I dated is around 980, so it's a little bit older than the previous one. Here's another one. You can see the biface underwater. Here's the shell. There's the biface there. This one's around 380, so it's about 700 years old. This is already washed out of the sediments, but you can see it's a turtle effigy on a pipe. It's a stone pipe. It's around 500 BC. Here's a archaic projectile point in situ. This has been plowed here, historically plowed. It wasn't with a Steiger tractor, it was probably a mule. So this would be about 10,000 years old. Any other features associated with it are now gone. Here's another one. This one was exposed, literally there's a tornado went across Northampton County. And this was after the tornado. And you can see a big slumping of that, and you look there, we'll zoom in. This one's 13,000 years old, when sea levels were 150 feet lower. And this locality is, or at least that portion of the locality is gone. Still something there, 7. And then if you accept the dates that we got on the prehistoric component on the west side of Parsons Island, not too far from that 19th century well, this could be 20,000 years old. We did residue analysis on this. It had camelid. Last time you saw camels running around on Delmarva. We did find a camel tooth there. It's the large-headed llama, Hemopina, macrocephala. Not that everyone here know that, but anyhow, this thing is, during the last glacial maximum. So, there are many times that I think I'm the only one who's really concerned about this, because I've been screaming this stuff to state agencies for 32 years, and guess what? Silence has loaded the sky. Really and truly, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, you know what? When you don't really care anymore, you can really say what's actually on your brain. I've recorded over 2,000 sites, and the only ones that have ever done any work on it is me and a few other folks that I'm going to give credit in a minute. And it's not that hard to do. And it really doesn't take that much effort. If a geoarchaeologist, a tree guy, and a lawyer can do it on weekends, I think somebody else can do it. I don't know, I'm just thinking outside the box here. But I leave you with a pop quiz here. The last one. Which one of these islands do you think eroded away first? Absolutely, you're correct. And not only did that erode away, all of that, that's James's Island, it's gone. So, if you take something away from here today, is that erosion is a very complicated equation. And it's not, you can't apply the same methods to each shoreline. And if you happen to be, wanting to buy some real estate, the last, I would have bought this, because this is not the land. I definitely would have bought that. So I want to thank Norm Brady, he's in the far back, and he'll run as soon as I'm over this lecture. I know how they work. Dave Thompson, who was he was the Van White with Sarah Bloodsworth. And then Jay Fleming. Jay, I've shared some pictures of James's for him. Cindy Schmidt is in the back, and Monty Messing's in the back. Sort of a collaborative effort, or as I like to say, we're the land of misfit toys. And but anyhow, that's all I have to say about that. I sure, go fire away. Okay, I see you're about ready to jump out.
I'm about ready to jump out. Yeah, I want to understand. So I have two actually. One is, does the erosion equate to the what you call it, accretion? Yeah.
Erosion
so is
accretion.
it the same? So is it the same ratio? Are we putting back as much land as we're losing? And then the second question is it the same principle around the peninsulas? And this one's personal because I live on one of these peninsulas.
Okay.
And so from what you said, even putting up a any kind of a barrier or a wall isn't going to do any good because the water's going to come in anyway if it's erosion.
I have seen people and advised people before, don't do riprap or bulkhead. Just because you know how to run a front end loader and you can carry heavy rocks doesn't mean you're an expert in coastal erosion. And there at Savage Neck, I showed you Savage Neck. I never forget this. It was in 2009. Savage Neck was stable for a long period of time. Half a dozen people bought waterfront lots. They put a series of drawings offshore, breakwaters. I never again, I saw the front end loader pushing the big boulders up, and I'm like, they're going to regret that. This is going to change the whole sediment flow. Shorelines reach it, especially down there, reach an equilibrium. But when you're coming from, I don't know, Philadelphia, Baltimore, to come out here to wait for your number, it's called, you probably haven't seen shorelines. And lo and behold, that one house on the southern end, gone. And they did it to themselves. That's how stupid they were. And I hate to be blunt, but you know, that's how stupid they were. And you know, I've seen it time and time again. Not all shorelines are eroding. Just because water's touching land doesn't mean you have to intervene. You don't have to be right on hard substrate. There are situations like, you remember I showed you the skull at 1750 sticking in the bank profile? The people that own that property had me down there. Norm's in the back, he's my witness. I told him, I said, if you gave me this property, I wouldn't take it for $1. And they said, why? I said, amazing view. I said, it's kind of like being on death row. You stave off the execution, but eventually you're going to get a lethal injection, you're going to die. And I said, this place is going. I said, here's what I would advise you to do. And I told them what to do if they wanted to stave off the execution for their life. And they didn't do that. It was expensive. They opted for the cosmetic look, and then they sold it to another couple, and now they're having the same problem. So, you know, it's a complicated series of equations. And so you have to gauge each shoreline accordingly. Do you have net erosion and accretion? Well, the islands on the lower end of the bay along the Atlantic seacoast have gotten much bigger. Moghorn Island was 900 acres. In 1640, now it's 7,500 acres of land. Smith Island, not the Smith Island Chesapeake Bay, the Smith Island on the Atlantic seacoast, is much bigger. It moves around a lot. So you don't want to go out there and build your monument to capitalism on Smith Island because you're going to be in the bay or in the ocean there. Myrtle, Ship Shoal, I'm trying to think. There's one other I can't think of, but they've all gotten bigger, much bigger. Some of them were actually patented because of the accretion, because there was nothing there. So basically, what you can see is that the sediment from upstream is moving downstream, and tidal and that moves both ways, because it's a bi-directional flow. But eventually it goes out the mouth of the bay or gets trapped in some valley, like in the Tangier Sound or Hoboken Sound. So, is there an accretion that offsets erosion? No, erosion is much greater. But some of that is exacerbated just by us. So did I do the political response and completely avoid answering the question? Because what I did, okay.
And those, when the accretion happens to an island, are the artifacts from old islands showing up on those?
When you see accretion, generally you don't find doodling, is what I say.
Really?
Yeah, it's the fine particles that are accreting.
Oh.
When I walk a shoreline, I look, oh, there's a light fraction over here. Let's go where the coarse fraction is here, because that's where all the heavy things are going to be. And that's the stuff that represents the arrowheads, the axes, and all sorts of stuff. And then as the shoreline erodes, you get the depressions offshore that collect this stuff. So, all right.
Does the erosion continue underwater once these are gone?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Absolutely.
What does that mean for our boating charts to tell us the depth of the water?
Oh yeah, where Sharp Island existed, there's now, I think in one spot, it's about 11 feet of water. So you not only had 7 feet above water, you're going to add the 11 feet below the water. That's a lot of sediment. So when people talk about sedimentation, oh my God, we're going to put no till on the farm. Now granted, tilling has added a lot of sediment to Chesapeake Bay. But I think, granted, I may be lying here, so you don't hold it. But I did a calculation one time. It's one of those model things that, models are nothing more than just random statistical gobbledygook. You put in an equation, you get a number, and people go, ooh, and they think, but I think I calculated that sharks had contributed like 4 million cubic yards of sediment since 1848. So, and that's just one island. That's not calculating James Island, which was 1,100 acres, or just shy of 1,100 acres. So, yeah, it does erode beneath the base of it. It's not like there's a flat plateau there. You can take a boat across James Island. I saw crab potters setting crab pots in a big boat where 10 years prior to, we were doing soil profile descriptions in an abandoned plow field. So. Okay, I see Paul in the background. He's got it.
Yes. Thank you, Darrin. 2 questions. One
Go for it.
You said you had these surveys from the 1850s.
Yep.
That very accurately show the marshes and the farmlands and the fields very accurately. So my question is this: has that declination line, my first question, between the marsh and what was arable farmland, has that changed in 165 years?
It has changed in some spots.
And the second question is, I do a lot of hunting in southern Dorchester County, and I noticed there's these highlands that once had living trees and are ghost forests. And they said because of salt water from sea level rise. Can you also explain that? So that's
Sure.
the question. So it's about
Okay. You can ride down to like Elliott's Island. We did a lot of work down there. You can go down to Blackwater, and you'll see dead trees. Lots of dead trees. When you look at the dead trees, look at the other features there. There are usually a lot of straight ditches. There was an era in the early portion of the 20th century, they must have got paid by the linear foot of ditch dredging because there are little hummocks down near Elliott's Island that look like somebody said, hey, let's lay a spider web over here and let's dig ditches around it. The flawed concept was you dig the ditch, you get the excess water from the land out into the bay or whatever type of it. But what they failed to recognize is that there's bidirectional flow. So when you have a high tide, that water comes in. So you change the whole salinity regime. That's one thing. So now what was formerly low salinity or fresh is now salty. And it may even be hypersaline in the summer months because you get the water to come in, you get evaporation, and you measure the salinity regime that's through the roof. The other thing that you can do, you can kill a forest by digging a ditch through it. I showed you that one artifact that had turned black and had been beneath marsh. That's called acid sulfate biogeochemistry. I could give you the most boring lecture on the planet, but it's cool stuff. When you dig through anaerobic sediments, you expose it to oxygen that it hadn't been exposed to, you get a couple things that happen. If you've ever had the opportunity to go down Hooper's Island or even down to Blackwater, and low tide, hot summer day, look in those ditches, you'll see rust stains. What gets released is a lot of iron oxides, a variety of iron oxides. I won't bore you, but it can take the pH from neutral to down to almost 2. And you can dissolve quartz with a pH of 2. And so, the reason why some of those forests are now ghost forests is because we screwed them up. The other thing is we allowed people, it's pristine forest, but we got money there in those trees. We go out there and clear cut it. I don't know whether Tom Bradshaw's here, but anyhow, he sent me some pictures of a ghost forest. Somebody from Ben's was mapping it out. He says, look at this forest. It's all dead. I said, yeah, look at those ruts. A rut from a tire from the extraction of a tree is the same thing as a ditch. And I said, you go in there, you think, oh, well, we're just harvesting a few trees. Each one of those ruts, when you have storm surge or whatever else, become a potential ditch. The other thing that's happened, drive around the Del Mar, especially down the lower, look out in the field and you see a little cemetery, half a dozen people dead, that got buried there in 1850. Look at those cemeteries, they're always elevated up. So the surrounding field is topographically low. You can plow a landscape down to sea level. So they don't plow those landscapes like they used to, but they did aggressive plowing for at least 300 years. And as a result, the surrounding plowed fields, or the surrounding landscape, which may have trees on it now, has been topographically reduced. So you've got a couple variables. Then you also have another thing that might be geologic. Extraction of water from the shallow water aquifer. Landscapes will sink. Water doesn't compress, but when you remove it, landscape will go down. There's some great pictures. I used to use them in my geology classes that I taught, showing the Napa Valley, and they had an iron rod or I don't know whether it's telephone pole or something, but they had the date of the elevation of the land surface over time. It's because of the extraction of the fresh water, the landscape's actually sinking. So the underlying geology of Del Mar is very complicated. There are paleo channels that have cobbles, gravels, and whatever else. Under Blackwater, there's a paleo channel in Susquehanna that's loaded with cobbles and gravel. If you take fresh water out of that to spread on your soybean field because you have a drought or cornfield, that's the landscape that's going to go down first. So some areas you're getting the loss of the upland because of a combination of those variables. Oh, okay, lady wrong side, Paul.
Do you think the work they've done at Poplar Island will actually preserve the island or put it into a job on the surrounding area?
Remember what I said about anaerobic sediments. That's anaerobic sediments. Go out there and look at the PVC pipe and look at the rust on the PVC pipe. When have you seen PVC rust? Take a trip. I asked the driver, I said, what do you do out here? He says, I'm monitoring the well. So let me ask you a question, PVC, or on the PVC pipe. Have you ever thought about that, Russ? He goes, no. I said, don't tell me, pH around 2, 3? He goes, yeah, how the hell did you know that? I said, you got ferrous hydride, you look at the dry level on the side of the dikes. I said, this thing is hot. They had the International Acid Sulfate Conference, which is like watching paint dry in College Park. A bunch of cerebral ed kids who can do chemistry at the wazoo. They wanted me to go out there too, because I wrote an article for them in a presentation. They made the request. These are the foremost scientists in the world that study that. They were turned down. Okay, any other questions? Far back, lady in the front.
I didn't understand when you were talking about the erosion
Okay.
of these islands. Some of them were, started out a long time ago, and the erosion was 5 or 6 acres or whatever it was a year, but more currently it was almost a lot.
Yeah, that's because generally, like I said, the last piece of an island to go was tidal marsh. Tidal marsh is nature's rebar. It is much more resistant to erosion. So when you get down to that last remnant, it's a more erosion-resistant landscape, so it lingers. Sharks Island, Lincoln, it had been all up on it, would have washed away, many decades before that. But the last fragment was tidal marsh. Sure. Okay, guy over here with long arm. And then I'll answer your question.
the stone pile south of Sharp's Island
Mhm.
that we'll use to dredge oysters, were those stones put there by you first, or they just eroded, everything else eroded and left them?
There's a big slab or big exposure underneath that plateau of Sharp's Island. It's zone 2 of the Calvert Formation. It's an indurated zone with irregular staghorny looking chunks. It looks like cement. That's what forms as a byproduct of that layer in the Miocene. Native Americans use it to make projectiles out of it, but you're talking about stone rock, and it's a big area. So it is a naturally occurring indurated or silicified zone on the coastal plain of Delmarva. And it's right there. And it may have played a role in the reason why Sharps was there and lingered, because when sea levels were 25, 35 feet lower than they are today, that would have been a natural geologic riprap that would have impeded that erosion. Okay. Oh, there you go. You go. There you go.
What can you say about Tillman Island? What's that situation? Is it stable?
Yeah, it's now stable because it's got riprap all around.
But you
Yeah,
said
and
it's
it's to my detriment. I used to love to go around telling when it's eroding, but anyhow, but yeah, it's all riprap and okay. There's a few spots that are not eroding, or they're not stabilized, not many. Because when I was a kid, you could certainly have anything.
But I thought you said riprap where you are.
Depends on the setting. Riprap and depends on the setting. So, in the case of Savage Neck, riprap was bad. So you gotta look at look at what the geology is telling you. That's the reason why I say, just because you can install a bulkhead or riprap doesn't mean you understand what's going on long term. There's a lot of key indicators.
What about Naps and Arrows?
What's that?
What about Naps and Arrows?
Naps and Arrows is actually accretional. It's actually gotten, it was originally wider, now they filled it in all sorts of dredge spoil, so it's a big amalgamation of crud that they pumped up there. Okay, lady here who shook her head when I was saying about acid sulfate, so I can't wait for this one. If you want me to break up that,
I'm not gonna ask you about.
okay, go for it.
But I'm gonna ask you about, if you're moving into the call, would you be moving into a situation with more subsidies?
Could be, depends on where you are, yeah. Yeah, I mean, granted, the Mississippi Delta, you get.
Gas withdrawal too.
Gas withdrawal, yeah. Yep, when you move something out of the ground, and it's a liquid or something of viscosity, you gotta expect, things to same.
They are going to.
Yeah, exactly. So, we don't think about that. There you go. You've been sitting there with a Cheshire Cat grin, so I can't wait for this one. Go for it. Well, I'm pointing to you, the guy with the glasses. Didn't you have your hand up? No. I thought you did. Oh, okay. Anybody else?
Want to touch on the Salutrian theory a little bit for him, right quickly?
No. That's a whole nother ball of wax.
The one point, or just briefly for them.
That 20,000-year-old point.
Yeah.
20,000. They're making, like I say, they're making 5-pointed forms in Siberia. I put a lot of rocks up to my ears. Oh, and by the way, I brought this. I almost forgot about. For those that want to see, this is chronological. This is the stuff from Sharp's Island. You can see it if you want to. It's like from when I was younger. And you can see the 50 caliber machine gun bullet, and then you can see the clothes. So, I'll set that here. That's a whole nother presentation. Okay, gentleman in the back with the long arm again. Yeah.
You know the island in the Miles River, which is on the north side, just across from the mouth of Oak Creek?
Long Point Island.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Can you put on your prediction cap and say when that island?
Oh, there's some stuff there. Yeah, there's some stuff there. We found some stuff there.
When will it disappear?
It's actually felt fairly protected.
It's for sale.
Yeah.
It is for sale.
It is for sale. Look,
yes.
if you want an island, go for it.
And my grandfather, in the 1920s and 30s, they still had farmland on the island. They drove on low tide the steam engine and wheat thresher over to it. So I always tell people, look, you look at the map, you see Long Point was still connected, and it was a point where Ruff's Island was an island, and it's filled in, like you said, all there.
Yeah, it cut through it. Historically, it was connected. I do know that. It wasn't an island all that long. There was a point, but it broke through. But I wouldn't have a problem with that one. I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't have bought James's island if I owned it. But anyhow, lady in the far corner.
Yeah, he just asked an interesting question. I was thinking about, what about Tillman Neck down there in Claymore?
Tillman Neck is a little bit persnickety. I would be worried about that. I wouldn't buy that. Geologically, I mean, granted, it has been retreating. Usually what happens, and this is a pattern I've seen, when a point breaks and you get flow through it, it will melt away like a hot knife cut through butter. It will accelerate. And I've seen that time and time again. So, you know, you got to prioritize. I mean, if you want to really look at a landscape that has disappeared immensely, you know, Cook's Point, I remember walking a field on the distal end of Cook's Point with a shell midden out there and seeing a combine harvesting, I think it was corn at that time. And that is now a little over half a mile up the job where I saw a combine. And that's not that long ago. I don't consider myself ancient. Could be. Any other things, Mike? Well, I greatly, you got a question.
Naps Narrows, you said it's going through accretion now.
Was
it always there, or was the landmass all the way up the peninsula?
Naps, the island was probably connected to the mainland, not by the peninsula. You know where Tar Island is. That's Western Mouth. Look up. There's an island there. Probably connected by the point that's even further to the north at one time in the past, just based on the erosion rate. And generally, what I suspect, now it's been historically an island since day one. As that thing broke through, it separated pretty quickly. But historically, in 1654, it was an island. So it was an island. It was probably connected somehow, maybe back 1500s or even 1400s. So, but you won't have to worry about it. Oh, lady there.
I'm just worried, I'm not worried. I'm asking a question about St. Michael's, the harbor in St. Michael's.
Oh, you're fine.
The 1650s.
You're fine. Yeah, it's just a high tide. That's the nature of it. And I decided, because people kept saying, oh yeah, it's easy for you to say. I just purchased 7.5 acres on the ocean near Wetumpka Island on the mainland. I did all the research. I looked at what the landscape looked like in 1850, 1900, 1937, all the way through. And now I can probably say, look, I've watched it, I've seen the boundaries, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and trust me, it will be there in another century.
So for St. Michael's, I'm just wondering if it was deeper earlier, because there's a lot of silt, but there's also, the erosion, like
the harbor. I mean, it's probably, well, the other thing that I can tell you, the reason why you're seeing much more frequent inundations, go back to Fisherman's Island. The mouth of the bay is shallower today than it was in 1850 and all the intervening impacts. How do we know that? We have bathymetry. And the reason why that is a combination of things. First of all, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge tunnel didn't help things because it's a big sediment fence. That's the reason why Fisherman's has gotten 10 acres a year gained since the construction of that was in 1960. When it was constructed in 1960, that tunnel was not subject to the National Environmental Policy Act review. So there's no, it was like, we're a bunch of engineers, we can build shit across here, and that's what they did. So when they did do that, it really shallowed up. Now you think, oh, who cares? Well, what did that do? We have an account for Tangier Island. And in 1904, the tidal amplitude of Tangier Island was 2 feet on average. From high to low, Today, the tidal amplitude at Tangier Island is 1.5 foot. That means that less water is going out of the bay today than it did in 1904. What is the compounding effect of that? That means you had more water in the bay at any given moment in time than you did a century ago. If you have more water in your bathtub and you add more water to it, what is the likelihood it's going to overflow? And you know, there are other indicators that things have changed. We were looking at those shell bid. We looked at a bunch down on Fishing Bay. Fishing Bay's salinity is about 15 to 18 parts per thousand. You know, oysters can live there. But around 1000 AD, the salinity down there was about 24 to 26 parts per thousand. What that means is that there's more impulse of salt water from the ocean in the bay prehistorically than there is today. And there are other indicators. I can say that I can go on for hours and definitely push you to sleep. But the point being is, the bay, you could go down to Fishing Bay, Elliot's Island, look around and think, oh wow, it's pristine, oh yeah, save the bay, we're gonna restore it back to John Smith. The thing you see today didn't look anything like that. Didn't look anything like that. Every plant you see down there was different, 1000 AD. The types of resources that were there were different. There were moon snails living in Fishing Bay. Moon snails, you don't know, who cares? You know, moon snails, who cares? The closest moon snails would be about southern end of Watts Island today. That means that they could colonize further north because the salinity is high. There are key indicators that the tide latitude was a lot greater, exposing more of the bottom on a regular interval because there are dunes formations like Sandy Hill. I know where Sandy Hill, Dorchester County is. There's a big dune that migrated across there, that landscape, just outside of Cambridge. Underneath that dune is about 1000 AD. To get that dune to build, you need regular exposure of the bottom for a longer period of time so the wind can pick up those particles and deposit. You couldn't build that dune today. So not only was it saltier, but the tidal amplitude was greater. You think about what I just said. You have greater tidal amplitude, you have less erosion. You have lesser tidal amplitude, you have more erosions. Probably the reason why some of the erosions are created is because we created that. We built that damn big ass bridge across there, and it's trapped a ton of sediment. It's changed the whole ecology upstream. Say that in the presentation, like I just did. Okay, we're gonna wrap it up. I think somebody's gonna wrap it up. Okay, cool. Well, that's all I have to say.